Kentucky basketball has had some interesting things happen to the program as of late. Is there any legitimate reason for concern? In my opinion, no.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we're going to talk about the good and the bad, just the overall state of the program for the Kentucky Wildcats. Is there any reason for concern after losing out on a five-star recruit and maybe not having the best scrimmage ever against La Familia just a week ago? I don't think that there's any reason to panic. And if you're out there on social media worrying about Kentucky right now, pump the brakes, because we've got some positive news for you here today on the show. On the other hand, Kentucky football wrapped up I would say less than eventful SEC media days on Thursday last week with some quotes from Mark Stoops, some of them worth taking a look at, some of them not as much. We're going to dive into just my overall thoughts on Kentucky football right now. It's going to take a lot from Mark Stoops in order to get things done this season and find some success that Kentucky fans are pleased with. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. You can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. You can use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, I would love it if you subscribe to the show. We're trying to get to 20,000 subscribers before the start of the season. I think we can get there. Would love it if you subscribed today. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So Kentucky basketball has had two things over the last week not necessarily go their way, and I think that there's a lot of different positive things to point to in the opposite direction, despite some people on social media wanting to tell you otherwise. So first and foremost, Kentucky missed out on Jason Crowe Jr. last week. He committed to Missouri as we expected for two and a half weeks here on the show. I mean, that was my opinion after the report came out that apparently Missouri had offered him a boatload of money and some other things. It sounded like he was going to end up being a Tiger at the end of the day. That's not that big of a deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, we've talked about the multiple players Kentucky can and is going after in the 2026 recruiting class that would fit the mold, I think, a little bit better, the mold that Mark Pope is looking for. By the way, I just want to be clear. If we had gotten Jason Crowe Jr., it would have been awesome. Kid is a bucket. Kid can score. He would have been a lot of fun at Kentucky. However, Darren Rippey Jr. looks great. Still trying to go after Tay Kenny. Caleb Holt is becoming more and more and more of a player that, if you aren't already, you need to be monitoring. Tyrion Stokes is still very much so in the picture for Kentucky. In fact, it might be a little bit more than we currently think. There's no reason to panic on the recruiting front. As I have said on the show recently, if you look around to see what scouts are kind of saying about this 2026 class, it's maybe not as deep as some recent high school classes have been. And so if Kentucky ends up retaining a lot of their talent from this season, which we went over recently, that's probably going to be the case. Not only does Kentucky not have room for a large recruiting class, they would also probably be more inclined to go get players in the portal instead of 3 or 4 freshmen to round out next year's roster. Yes, you can still go after freshmen. Yes, they can still make an impact. Yes, I think it would be good to add talent, but there are other ways that you can do it, possibly by just retaining guys, and then also transfer portal kids are probably going to prove to be more valuable day one than a lot of 4-star-ish guys that you could possibly go after. So on the recruiting front, there's no reason to be worried about Kentucky. Absolutely no reason. On top of this, if you want to get excited about where this university is pouring their resources, like where they are kind of investing here, it came out earlier today from Matt Norlander that Kentucky is expected to dedicate 45% of its $20.5 million cap for the 2025-2026 season on men's basketball. So Kentucky's going to take a little over $9 million of their $20.5 million cap, which everybody's operating with, and they're going to give that to the basketball program, compared to the $3 million most SEC teams are giving to men's basketball. That is an insane investment. It's triple what other SEC teams are doing. Kentucky is making it very clear they're all in on basketball. This is a basketball school. Whether you like it or not, basketball is going to come first over every other sport, including football, as Kentucky is dedicating almost half of its revenue, or its $20.5 million cap to the basketball program, whereas a lot of us other SEC teams are not going to be doing that. And we'll talk about the football program here in a second. It's not looking good for Mark Stoops and company, but it's looking pretty dang good for the Wildcats in terms of money and in terms of future adding talent. Kentucky's fine. Second thing, we'll talk about La Familia, by the way. They've been playing some good, some bad. Who was really good against Rose Squad. Not as good against War Ready. Found a way to win that game at the end. Almost blew it. Whenever you're up 3, you can't be chucking shots like that. You have to be able to go to the rim, especially considering War Ready had not been able to stop that consistently throughout the course of the game. But I digress. We'll talk about that tomorrow after they play their third game of the TBT. We'll break down kind of everything that's been happening if they win or lose. But the scrimmage that this year's Kentucky team had against La Familia didn't go so well. If you want to go find the details, I would encourage you to go to KSR. They had a bunch of details about how the scrimmage went, different standouts, individual specific things that I'm not gonna rip what they had from behind the paywall. But it came out on social media. Just generally speaking, scrimmage didn't go so well. Current Cats still won, by the way, I want to be clear. But is there any reason to panic because Kentucky didn't play as well against La Familia this year? No, for a couple of reasons. We'll get into that here in just a second. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Monarch Money. Have you ever wished managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. You can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. You can use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. For me, this was really awesome to be able to get started with Monarch and realize just how much I was spending on takeout and random subscriptions to things that I thought I needed. Turns out I didn't. Some places I was paying for 2 different subscriptions that I didn't need, and Monarch Money was able to help me get that sorted out so that I can budget and save more efficiently. Again, use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com. You can get 50% off your first year. Monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. So we talked about how on the recruiting front, some not great news with Jason Crowe Jr. It's not that big of a deal, in my opinion. Like very much so, not that big of a deal. Scrimmage against La Familia didn't go so well. Any reason to panic for the Cats? No. First and foremost, a good chunk of this La Familia team has played with each other now after getting to play several competitive games with each other a season ago, making a deep run in the TBT. They're better. It's clearly a better team based on what we've seen than a season ago. Lengthy, solid defensively. Didn't sound like Kentucky current Cats were very healthy either. Not everybody was out there. So just take everything here with a grain of salt. Anything you hear in summer practices, you have to be able to take a step back and realize, okay, how much of a deal, how big of a deal is this? Look at the current state of the roster. Look at who's healthy. Look at who's not. Yelovich isn't even here. Jaden Quaintance isn't healthy and ready to go yet. And I want to continue to stress this. A healthy Jaden Quaintance is going to solve so many problems for Kentucky defensively that currently exist, whether it be not being able to stay on ball, not being able to stay in front of ball handlers, not being able to physically wall up and contest shots consistently, lack of physicality, lack of speed, lack of whatever. JQ is going to put a plug in that defensively. Kentucky has the tools also, I think, to be a much, much better team offensively once the non-con slate gets going. You got those two scrimmages against Georgetown and Purdue. You're going to be able to figure out a lot of different things with your mostly healthy rotation, Jaden Quaintance pending, right? And then once the non-con slate starts, after getting this experience against La Familia, Purdue, Georgetown, you're going to be able to take off, I think, a lot better than maybe some other college basketball teams are. It's a scrimmage also. This isn't anything serious. It's just a scrimmage. And they played 3 quarters, it sounds like, before they did the Elam ending. It's fine. And if anything, guys, this is good for Kentucky to be able to get a feel now for how some of their players fit into the rotation. We've talked about this. We're going to continue to talk about this. There's a lot of guys on this roster at guard and on the wing that aren't they don't fit a specific mold. They're very versatile pieces. They can be slid 1 through 3 pretty comfortably. Mark Pope actually talked today with the media about how Otega Owe has been playing a little bit of point guard. Interesting. We'll see how that goes. But nobody on this roster outside of Jalen Lowe and Jaden Quaintance, I think, are true. Well, that's not even true. Jalen Lowe and Malachi Marino are true to their position. Nobody on this at guard or wing is a true offensive engine or a elite secondary ball handler or playmaker. There's a lot that needs to be figured out as far as how this team gels and how these players fit role-wise. What are you doing for me within a specific role relative to the ball-dominant playmaker like Jalen Lowe or the bruiser wing in Otega Owe or maybe the versatile 4-man in Andrea? All of these guys can kind of spread out and play similarly to each other, not necessarily at the most elite level on the planet. So it's about picking and choosing your spots for different guys and figuring out what works best for different sets, what works best for different ISO stuff, which works best defensively against different teams with different personnel groups. Jalen Lowe, Jasper Johnson, Denzel Aberdeen, Colin Chandler, Otega Owe, Mo Diabate, Cam Williams, that's your 1 through 3-ish that you need to be able to figure out where guys fit. So it's not that big of a deal. They still won. Kentucky is investing. Kentucky's going to be fine recruiting-wise. Kentucky's going to get healthy. They're going to get Andrea Yelovich in. Everything's going to be okay. So for anyone out there worrying on Twitter or on Instagram, there's no reason to be. This has been a pretty good offseason. This has been a very good offseason. If you can get Yelovich in by the end of August, early September, I think you're in a very good spot. Let's talk about Kentucky football. Mark Stoops took the podium at SEC Media Days and didn't really have a whole lot to say other than just be acknowledging that, it's kind of hard to be in this league for 13 straight years. He is the longest tenured SEC head coach right now. Active, I should say. And he summed up, I think, the past year and a half of Kentucky football. And I think what's going to be the case this fall in 4 words. He said, this S is hard. This crap is difficult. Pretty much sums up how we all feel about it, right? He implied that Eli Drinkwitz is on a list of sorts. And he said that he's excited about Zach Calzada because he's won big games in the SEC. I don't really think the career is as decorated as maybe Mark Stoops makes it out to be in that sentence. Obviously, yes, he beat Alabama. Outside of that, not a whole lot going on. Played well at Carnet Word, by the way. I don't want to trash Zach Calzada. There's a chance things go well. There's a chance he takes off. He's got a pretty strong arm. Kid can sling it. He's not been consistently healthy based on the times that I have seen him, and I've watched him quite a good bit in person. It's going to be difficult to envision Mark Stoops getting out of this hole with just how bad the offense was a season ago and could be this year. He says he's excited about Calzada. He said that the last season was a wake-up call. That's why they cleaned house, essentially roster-wise, right? Probably didn't want to lose Berrien Brown and Dane Key. Probably just a guess. Any dreams that Kentucky football has this season, after doing a little bit of research, could be dead by week 5. If they are not dead by week 5, it's simultaneously both an incredibly impressive coaching job and a failure of the teams surrounding Kentucky on their schedule in terms of like failing to meet expectations. Kentucky could be dead by, well, technically it's actually week 6 heading into week 7, because Kentucky gets both of their byes before by mid-October. You kick your season off against Toledo, who, based on what I've seen, is a decent MAC program currently. Obviously, with Jason Candle, they have been for a while. I just don't know just like how good is Toledo going to be this season. You get them to start. Then you get Ole Miss at home. Ole Miss still projected to be a top 20 team. You get Eastern Michigan week 3. That's the easiest game on your schedule outside of Tennessee Tech in November. Then you get your bye. And then it's back-to-back road games at South Carolina, at Georgia. You are more than likely going to be 2-3. If you are anything better than that, I think it will be a shock. It will be a surprise. Because here's the problem. Kentucky's offense sucked last season. Here's some stats. Kentucky was 107th nationally in yards per play, 81st in total yards per game, 112th in pass yards, 119th in rush yards per game. They were 120th in turnovers lost, 119th in third down conversion rate, 109th in red zone touchdown rate. They sucked. Here's where Kentucky's first 5 opponents rank in defensive SP plus heading into this season. 63rd, 9th, 111th, there's Eastern Michigan, 15th and 4th. You should beat Eastern Michigan. I am uncertain about Toledo. You should be favored and you should win, but we've seen how Kentucky has played against some of these MAC schools, playing with their food with what I think were better rosters over the last 3 years. I'd pick them to win that game right now, but who knows, right? Especially with a top half defense nationally coming in against what is going to be a retooling offense. Your playmakers, Zach Calzada, Dawe from Nebraska, Seth McGowan, Jason Patterson, if he can keep his shoes on, Harley Gilmore coming back to Kentucky, Kendrick Law from Alabama, Jamori Macklin, who had over 1,700 yards at North Texas, collected 313 at UK last year, took a bit of a step back as opposed to some of Kentucky's other weapons. Josh Caddis at tight end. Dowdle, McGowan, Patterson, Gilmore, Law, Macklin, Caddis. And then the pilot, Zach Calzada. Calzada has, in terms of Division I FBS stats, he has 2,300 yards to his name. Dowdle has 700. McGowan has 1,100, almost 1,200. Gilmore has 153. Law has 343. Macklin has 313 at UK. He's 1,700 yards collectively, I believe. Josh Caddis is 310. These are a lot of guys that have gotten a little bit of playing time, but are, for the most part, unproven on a game-to-game basis, consistently providing production outside of Dawe and McGowan. I mean, Kentucky's they've got a pretty good running back room. But man, can you get the ball out to your playmakers through the air? I don't know. Again, against Ole Miss, South Carolina, Georgia, your first 3 SEC games. Oh, by the way, doesn't get easier because after you play Georgia, you take another bye week, and then October 18th you go to Texas, or you play Texas and Tennessee back-to-back home games. Then you go to Auburn. You return home against Florida, Tennessee Tech, at Vanderbilt, at Louisville to end the year. You got to do something offensively. You got to change something up offensively. Because with this personnel group, there's not a lot of confidence, right? Mark Stoops is going to have a Herculean coaching effort in order to get this team past their schedule. It is both a combination of, I think, a pretty bad offensive roster and just a bad schedule. This is a tough out, man. We'll see if they can do it. We'll talk more about it as it gets closer. But right now, it's looking rough. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. Follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I'll see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.